Milestone 2 for Educational Technology CS6460. My name is Kunal Sharma and I'll be talking about the work that I've done so far for the course Conversational Agents using MindMeld. Let's get right into it. As a recap, let's talk about the motivation and the audience for this course. Well, there's growing interest from both the academic and industry side to understand how conversational agents work. We've seen them increasingly become mainstream with applications such as Siri and Alexa, but we also see them spread across various industries, for example, fashion or commerce in general, where chatbots are being used to interact with customers, answer questions, or direct them to products, etc. In other words, we see them improve everyday challenges and improve business revenue. As a result of this, there's quite a bit of demand on both the industry and academia to understand how to build better chatbots or how to leverage existing technology to serve business needs. This course in particular is different from others in the market because it offers and focuses on using MindMeld that has a straightforward architecture, it's written in Python, it's free, and does not require cloud storage setup. This makes it a great introduction for students who are just getting into the field. These students could be undergraduate or graduate, or they could be working individual with maybe only a year of experience in the area or looking to switch from a related field into this one. Let's talk about the course objectives again. First is that we want to have a working understanding of the different types of chatbots there are and the advantages and disadvantages for each. Second, we want to understand the high-level architecture of a conversational application using MindMeld and know how different components work together to manage dialogue and achieve a goal. This includes understanding the end-to-end system flow of between when a user says something and how the chatbot can interact with it in order to achieve a business goal or perspective that has been set out. Third is to have experience actually coding out the chatbot end-to-end from ideation to conversation. And lastly, to understand the text preprocessing pipeline, which is key in the data creation process, as well as entity recognition, dialogue management, knowledge base use, and model evaluation process. So let's talk about what we covered in Milestone 1. In Section 1, we talked about this course at a high level for conversational agents, discussed the history of chatbots, how they're being used, and some of the research around them, what has allowed them to succeed so much in recent time in terms of GPT-3 and other language models. We next in Section 2 discuss the domain, intent, and entity and role hierarchy. These are the levels of hierarchy that help the system classify and interact with the incoming data. So the domain and intent classifiers will first create latent representations of the incoming query and then classify them using multi-layered neural networks, which is discussed in this section. The entity and role hierarchy systems are sequence-based models that can use systems such as LSTMs, or long short-term memory, in order to identify and label tokens in the sequence of tokens that constitute the query, and also classify that at the same time as having some particular type. For example, if you say I want to order a pizza from Pizza Hut, the entity recognizers can recognize that the last two words Pizza Hut are in fact an entity, and that they're also the entity related to some restaurant. And in Section 3, we talked about dialogue managers and dialogue state handlers. Once the particular intent or domain has been classified or understood, downstream, MindMeld is a rule-based system. So it says, hey, if the domain is to order some food, let's go ahead and look at what food or what restaurants the user has spoken, and based on that, we can either follow up with, hey, what dish do you want, or which restaurant did you want to order, or maybe disambiguate some queries, etc. So we've been able to discuss quite a bit so far in Milestone 1 with these 3 sections. Now let's take a look at what we cover in Milestone 2. There are 3 additional sections we cover in Milestone 2. Section 4 is creating the knowledge base and using the question answer. Now this section essentially explains how you can store a large amount of data in a structured way and how you can access it very quickly within your MindMeld application using the question answer. You can think of the question answer as a Python object that can kind of behave like SQL, where you can filter out some data, sort some data, and generally manipulate data before finally returning a list that is then handled by your application logic. In section 5, we talk about training data generation. How do we make labeled queries, and how do we define custom entities? Labeled queries use a particular syntax, and they're all stored inside of each of the intent folders for each domain in the application. We discuss where and how to store those examples, as well as the particular syntax that's used to identify the entities that are included in those example queries. We also talk about how to create entity mapping files, which tell you the different ways in which you can say the same entity. For example, you might say Central Park as Central 100 Main Street, or the Main Street. And all of these will be resolved to a single entity. And lastly, in section 6, we discuss data preprocessing and the text preparation pipeline. This is an extensible pipeline that allows you to configure different components that allow you to process the text, including the preprocessor, tokenizer, normalizer, and stemmer. And based on your language-specific requirements or domain-specific requirements, you might need custom versions of these applications. I'm now going to go over some highlight slides to kind of illustrate a little bit of what was done in Milestone 2. Here in Module 4, I provided an example of the JSON representation for knowledge-based data. We see with the sushi rolls, you can see what the category it is, the description, what restaurant it came from, if it has an image URL, and the ID or unique identifier for this particular entry. In Module 5, we talked about what the labeled queries are. You can see on the right that we can store them in these train.txt files, which are stored each inside of an intent folder. Here we have a single domain, store info, that has 5 intents, and each intent contains this train.txt file. In these files, we see that it contains the example queries that the MindMeld classification and entity recognizer classifiers train on. And here we specify with the particular syntax the entity name and the entity type. And in Module 6, this slide shows you the final step in putting everything together after discussing each of the components of how to specify a specific text preparation pipeline. Here we have an ASR preprocessor that converts automatic speech recognition text from croissant ready to prashant ready, and it corrects this. We have a gerund suffix stemmer that removes the ing inside of a word, or we have a remove explanation that removes the exclamation mark. And lastly, we import a default text preparation pipeline from using the text preparation pipeline factory, and then we override it with these individual components, finally returning the new text preparation pipeline. I also show then the last step, which is to make sure we pass in this new text preparation pipeline at the root level. Of course, there are more details to each of these modules. These were just the highlight slides. I'll also be providing the links to the entire set of videos for these additional modules. Now, as next steps, we have 2 more modules to go. We'll be talking about actually training the natural language processing classifiers. We'll discuss multi-domain architectures, review the course in its entirety, and provide the final project. I would also like to eventually migrate my videos from YouTube to Adlessons. I've reached out about that, and I'm hoping to figure out how to make that transition soon. And lastly, I'll be putting everything together into the final project and presentation. Thank you for your time.